Welcome, everybody. My name is Ruth Rumack. I am the founder and executive director of education at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. And we have a wonderful center in Toronto. We are now completely virtual. So all of the work that we're doing is virtual. We will, at some point soon, I hope, go back to in-person lessons. But in the meantime, we're able to offer all of our services virtually and with, a high degree of efficacy and success. And of course, it was a little turbulent at the beginning about a year ago in March when we weren't quite sure how it was going to work. But I must say that we have a fabulous team of teachers. Sabrina is one of them, and she is just a superstar in terms of taking all of the work that we do in person and making it accessible online as well. So as I introduced, Sabrina is one of our fantastic learning specialists at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. She's going to join us as well today. She's one of our math specialists. And we're going to talk about math phobia. This is a real thing. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, and I'll just lay down a couple of the rules in that when we're going to take a break for questions about halfway through. Thank you to everybody who has sent in their questions ahead of time. I've got a list of them over here, so we'll be checking in with those as we go along. And if there's something that comes up, put it in the chat. We will be answering the questions about halfway through and then again at the end. So you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions at that time. All right, I think we should get going. Let's get it started. That's me. We talked about it. Our RLS, we really work on a direct instruction pedagogy where we're working one-on-one with students. We also have created small group classes that are what we call scaffolded. So they're, one step leads to the next, which eventually leads to mastery. And something that's really important in math is that idea of mastery and building from one foundational skill to the next. All of our teachers are Ontario certified. And as I was saying, we have an innovative group of teachers that allows us to create really innovative lessons for our students, especially now at this time when we are virtual. All right, let's move along. All right, here we go. Math anxiety, math phobia. I'm actually going to ask you in the audience, put into the chat how you feel about math. Is math something that creates stress for you, or is it something that you feel very comfortable with? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Oh, Carrie says, love it. Thank you, Carrie. Love math, Isabel says. Wonderful. Anybody else have some comments about math? Either side, love it, hate it, indifferent. Well, we know that 38% of people use math, basic math, at least once or twice per week. Whatever said, Patrick says useful and necessary. Yes, very true. Well, that's where these statistics come in. 29% of people use algebra and formulas 1 to 2 times per week, and 4% use advanced math 1 to 2 times per week. So if you look at those numbers, 38% of people use basic math. If a person does not feel comfortable with basic math, and that's usually adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, throw in some fractions, throw in some percents. If you're not feeling comfortable, that's almost 40% of the population that doesn't feel comfortable using those facts. All right, so let's talk about math anxiety. And we use math all the time. It's around us everywhere we look. And yet, so many people feel a hesitation around it. And so many of our kids feel a hesitation around it. So let's talk a little bit further. We're going to move on to the next slide. Let's talk a little bit about phobia versus math stress, or just feeling uncomfortable. And the math phobia is really categorized by avoiding math, feeling uncomfortable with math, feeling unsure about it, and also talking negatively, not just about the subject, but negative self-talk when you're referring to the math and your ability in math. A math phobia is being afraid of it. But the funny thing is that it's not correlated with actual math ability. And we know this from studies. There were studies of some primary students, boys and girls, and they were asked how they felt about math, how they saw themselves as a math student. And it was very interesting that the girls felt that they had less capability in math. And yet when they looked at their test scores, their scores were higher than the boys, whereas the boys looked at it the other way. They felt really confident in math, and yet their scores were lower than the girls' scores. So perception is a really important. And it's important to understand the difference between a phobia and an anxiety, and the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is an actual math disability. So let's look at this slide. We're looking at math phobia versus math confidence. And somebody who has math phobia, who wants to avoid math, will say things like, oh, I just don't have the math gene. Or, you know, it's a talent to do math. I just don't have it. They give excuses. They give up easily. They avoid it. There's fear. Whereas somebody with math confidence, as we saw in the chat earlier, some people just are like, I love math. I love it. I'm all over it. They see it as a skill. They're curious about math. And I think one of the biggest differences that I see as an educator is this idea of curiosity versus shutdown. And when a student is feeling uncomfortable with a math concept, they will often shut down. We'll start to see even physical symptoms of, you know, head turning in, heads on the desk, sighing, yawning, looking like they're distracted or unfocused. Whereas somebody who comes at it with a curiosity or an understanding that, well, I may not know the answer, but I've got some skills to figure it out. That's where we see confidence. And that's really where we want all of our math students to go, no matter where they're coming from. Let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, so a lot of people will think that I can't say a lot. Many people might think that they have, or their children have, a math disability. And there's a very specific criteria for a math disability. We have math phobia and math anxiety, and then there's dyscalculia, which is the official term for a math learning disability or challenge. And it is categorized by difficulty decoding and encoding, memorizing and processing numbers. So the decoding and encoding is like looking at the numbers and understanding how they break apart and how you put them back together. It also impedes the acquisition of math facts, so your multiplication tables, your division tables, understanding how fractions work, and it only affects 3 to 6% of the population. So having an actual math disability is quite rare, whereas having math phobia or math anxiety or feeling stress around math is quite common. And that's really the big difference. Both situations need support. Both situations need a safe learning space where you can take risks and you can, you know, feel confident that it's okay to make a mistake and it's okay to fail because there's a supportive team around you. But when we're talking about dyscalculia, there actually is a different way that the brain is processing the numbers, looking at the numbers and having the understanding of how numbers work, which is different than just a phobia or a fear or stress. Let's look at the next slide. So when we look at a Venn diagram, and I love that we use a Venn diagram because that's a very mathy thing to use, we've got dyscalculia on one side saying that we've got poor marks because of misunderstanding or not being able to apply the information appropriately. Whereas on the other side of math phobia, we might have poor marks because of test anxiety or because of not preparing in the best way for that particular type of test. We've also got on the dyscalculia side, worrying about the test because you don't understand the material and it's very difficult to kind of connect the pieces or connect the dots. And on the phobia side, it's worrying about the test even when you do understand the material. And that's where the stress or anxiety comes in and it overtakes the actual understanding part of it. A person can be very confident in their ability to do the math on their own at home, do really well on practice tests and review sheets. But when it comes to the test, somebody with math phobia or anxiety may freeze in the test situation, not because they didn't know it, but because it was a test situation. Then we've got the middle ground where homework is laborious. It's challenging, it's difficult. And as parents, we are the ones that are there to support our kids, and we're with them, you know, all along the way, 100 steps of the way. And it's challenging for us too to watch our children be dejected, be upset, be confused, and then ultimately shut down. I would say that there's this self-talk, that negative self-talk, the expectation of failure. Well, I'm never going to get this. It's too hard. I can't figure it out. And then we have the marks, and that's what we were talking about earlier, where you've got perhaps marks that were less than expected based on the amount of studying that you did, or the amount of preparation and success you were having on your own versus the amount of success that you were having when you actually went to do the test for real. Let's move on. So I have to share my own story about math and my own story working with my daughter, who just turned 12. She's in grade 6 this year. I've got 2 kids. My daughter's 12 and my son is 28. So we've been through all the ages and stages of math, and we're doing it all over again. And my daughter does not like math. She just doesn't like it. She liked it up until about grade 2, and then something happened. I'm not exactly sure what. I have my ideas, but I think it might have been a teacher personality. Something didn't quite jive with her, and she just started to pull back from math more and more. And now she's in grade 6. Grade 6 is an important year. It's a great year for introducing all sorts of new things, new types of fractions and decimals and percents. We're working now on factors and multiples, and it's a lot of new material. And I can tell you from my own experience as a parent, and I just went through it like half an hour before getting onto this webinar. We were sitting down to do math. We're working on fractions and factors. And the factors, it's a brand new topic for her, and she's frustrated. And she's frustrated because she doesn't get it right away. And the thing I know about my daughter, and this is how I can differentiate her anxiety is an anxiety and not a learning challenge, is that when she allows herself to be free, when she sort of releases herself from the expectation and is able to concentrate on breaking the information down and then putting it back together. And when she practices and does lots of trial and error until she gets it right, she starts to feel confident. When she doesn't have enough practice, she gets very upset and you can see it physically. Tears might come. She's looking very distracted. She's more interested in her pen. She's hiding in her room because she knows that it's time to do math with mom. But one of the things that we really try and do, she and I, is make it fun and make it enjoyable. And we're going to talk more about how to do that so that in any situation, whether it's a diagnosed learning challenge or it's just a math phobia, there's a barrier that's gone up. We want to break down that barrier to make it enjoyable so that our students are going to be with us as we travel through the math journey. So here are some of the things that we might see: withdrawal, pulling back, kids getting nervous. I actually spoke to a student who had physical pain and sweat every time that she started to think about math. So not even just doing the math, but just thinking about it. There are feelings of embarrassment and loneliness because maybe you feel like you're the only one in the class that's not getting it. And there's that negative self-talk. I can't do this. I'm terrible at this. So these are all of the things that we want to avoid. We want to help our students avoid and our kids avoid, to give them more confidence so that they can be successful. And they can be successful. I will put that with a capital CAN. They can do it. We can do it if we do it together. Sabrina's nodding. She's like, yeah, it's possible. Even in some of the most difficult cases that we've seen, where there is a math disability that's been identified, there may be memory issues, there may be focus and attention issues, there may be a slew of issues going on. But we know that when we break the math down into its smallest components and we work in a way that is what we call kinesthetic, multimodal, it's energizing because we're using our bodies, we may be doing activities, we're using our hands, we're up, we're down, we're making it come alive off of the page. That's when we start to make connections with our students. Okay, let's see what else we've got. So, perfect segue. Mindset shift. We talk about the growth mindset at Root Through Max Learning Space all the time. And we can probably slide to the next slide too while we're talking. So we look at how do you change somebody's mindset about how they think about themselves? Well, we know that it's possible. Psychology for many years has told us that we can change our thinking. We can think differently about a situation. And when we change our thinking and we think differently about the situation, our behavior changes and the outcome changes. And often we need several repetitions and several examples of success before we actually believe that it's happening. I'm going to tell you one quick story about my student. She's probably in her 30s now. This was ages and ages ago, but she came to me starting at the end of grade 9 math. And in the end of grade 9 math, she was in an IB program, which is an international baccalaureate. She had a high volume of work, very bright kid, very capable, but math was her, as she felt, her nemesis at that time. And she came to me with about a 65, a mark of 65% at the end of grade 9. And she knew she needed to have more understanding than what was represented at 65% in order to be successful for grade 10. So we worked through the summer, and she came in feeling really dejected, really confused, really down on herself. And I said to her, look, we need a mantra. We need something that helps you get yourself out of that negative feeling. So we came up with the mantra, I am a math genius, and I have all the answers at my fingertips. And I encouraged her to play with that and to remind herself of this and to say it to herself, even when she wasn't doing math. I am a math genius and I have all the answers at my fingertips. And it was a joke at first, but it wasn't really a joke because I really wanted her to start thinking about herself as a math person. Well, we worked through the summer, practicing grade 9 concepts, starting to get ahead for grade 10. We worked through the grade 10 curriculum through the year. And by the end of grade 10, she had boosted her final mark up to about a 75. She was feeling good about that. We worked through grade 11. She continued to work through the summer, continued to practice the mantra. And when we got through to the end of grade 11, she took her final exit exam. And for international baccalaureate, you have to take an exit exam with between 30 and 40%. She got an 85. And in her entire course outline for her final course mark for math, she ended up with an 89% in math. When she started at the end of grade 9, she was at about a 65. And I turned to her at the end when she came in beaming with this mark she was showing me, look what I did. And I said, well, you cannot say that you're not good at math anymore. And she kind of, she smiled sheepishly and said, well, you might be right. So the mindset shift is really important. And the idea that you may not know it now, you may not know it yet, but there is possibility for you to know it in the future. Nothing is final and nothing is finite. Okay, let's look at some math myths. Men are better at math than women. False. Research has failed to show any difference between the sexes in math ability. We could debate about how many men are in math-related professions versus women, but I think there are many variables that are behind that, and that's a completely different webinar. We'll have to have that debate another day. There is a best way to do a math problem. No, I don't think so. There are often many ways to arrive at the same thing.
Ruth, Sally said it may be false that there's a best way to do a math problem, but the reality is that students are expected to solve the problems in the way that their teacher wants to get credit. It's a good point.
You know what? That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That is true. It's interesting because as educators who are working with students outside of the classroom, we will always go to the teacher's way of doing things first, because we want that student, of course, to feel comfortable in the classroom and make sure that they can participate with the rest of their class. But for some students, and it really depends on the student, because some students feel more, they're very anxious about doing it the way that the teacher has shown it, obviously. And of course, if it's a mark situation and the teacher's only giving you the mark if you can do it the way that he or she has asked you to, then yes, that adds another layer. But if it is a situation where they're not getting it one way and we can show them a different way that they understand it better, Then what we do as educators is we link the two pieces. So we say, okay, so you understand how it worked here. I'm going to show you how that same concept will work over here. So fair enough. It's not always that there isn't more than one way, but sometimes there's only one way that's going to get you the marks. True. Another myth is that people have a math mind and others don't. I really don't believe that. I really believe that people are more capable at math than they think that they are. And with the right support and the right guidance and the right practice, they will eventually come to see that themselves as well. Now, here's an interesting one. It's bad to count on your fingers. This is something that, we've been told for a long time, like, oh, that's a sign that you don't know math and you don't know what you're doing. But sometimes showing how things work with your fingers or being able to visualize and act something out with your hands can actually be very, very helpful. And it's not a sign that you don't know what you're doing or that you are weaker at math. It could just be that that's the way that you process that situation best. We're going to probably come back to that one a little bit later when we talk about some more hands-on things. Those good in math do problems quickly in their heads. Again, I like this. Even math professors review example problems before teaching them in class. I think that's very true. And that's a tricky thing. If you have a child who has a math phobia or math anxiety, and they're watching what they perceive as everybody else in the classroom getting it faster and more accurately than they are, that adds to that layer of stress. So if we can give kids the strategies and the tools to be able to work through the problem in a systematic way, it lessens the anxiety and it gives them a structure to hold on to. All right, let's see what else is next. Okay, here's the mindset. And we talk a lot, as I was saying, about this, the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And overall, we talk about if you have a growth mindset, you believe that you may not know it right now, but there is the potential, the possibility that you will learn it and understand it more fully in the future. Whereas the fixed mindset says, I will never get this. I will never be good at this. This is as far as I can go, and we're shutting it down here. And that's a hard nut to crack, if you want to put it that way, because when a person has decided, that's it, I'm done, I'm not going any further, there's no way that you can teach me, even that isn't true, but they believe it, they perceive that at the moment. And so as parents and educators, we kind of need to chip away at it, right, Sabrina? A lot of it is the environment that we set up around the learning, and the encouragement and the reminding that student of their past successes and how they can get back to that same happy place of feeling confident and feeling successful, even when it's a new item. This is the thing about my daughter, that, she will get to a point, we always start off the same way, starts off in a terrible mood, grumpy, scowly, hunched over, I don't want to do this, why do I have to do this? And I say to her, look, here I am, I'm here to support you through this. And my arms are open. I'll give you a big hug, in reality and virtually. I'm not working with my daughter virtually, but I mean, not necessarily literally. And I said, I've got the space for you. This is our time together to work through this. I know you're upset about it. I know it doesn't feel comfortable right now, but stay with me, because I'm going to lay it out for you step by step. We're going to do it together. We're going to practice it together. And eventually, once we go through those steps and she starts to see some success and some of those connections start to form, then she starts to relax. And then she starts to smile. And then she starts to whip through and say, I don't need your help. I don't need your help. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then when we get to the point where we practice enough that she feels confident with it, she's on top of the moon and she's singing and she's dancing in the kitchen while she's doing her work. But that entire arc of sort of getting from that grumpy place to this place of success and then sort of leveling off there, it takes work from me as the parent or the supporter, and it takes work from her because she has to go through the motions. Now, when she starts a new topic, we kind of start down at the bottom again, but because we've had success before, we're able to let's say, use that as a catalyst and remind her, well, remember when it didn't feel so comfortable with this idea? Let's go back to that, and we're going to try this other concept, but remember that eventually you will get it. So we want to kind of use past experiences to help move things forward. Now, I saw something pop up in the chat. Let's see what we've got here, if I can get to it. All right. Sally says there's another way to address this. Not all math teachers are good teachers. They may be very adept at math themselves, to the point that it all seems very obvious to them. Knowing that someone else can explain it better, a bell curve, encourages them to keep trying. You're absolutely right, Sally. And the thing is that there are many math teachers out there who are brilliant at math, who really know their stuff and are really great at showing what they know, but not as good as at communicating how to get there. And, that's where there is skill as an educator or a parent comes in to be able to break things down into small enough pieces so that the student isn't overwhelmed and can get to that place faster. We also have to remember that in a classroom, and especially now during the pandemic, there are a lot of variables at play. And you're teaching to many different learners with many different learning styles and many different needs. And just because a teacher is good at math themselves doesn't mean that their teaching style will appeal to all of the learning styles in their classroom. There's a speed variable. Some kids get things quickly. Some kids need to practice things a lot longer. And then there's just that skill of being able to communicate, to break something down into smaller pieces, which when you're in a time constraint and when you're teaching a classroom, let's take junior high or high school especially, you only have a certain amount of hours to do each particular concept. And if your class doesn't get it, unfortunately, because of the school system and the way that it's set up, you don't really have the opportunity to go back unless a child reaches out to you or you have, some sort of extra help situation set up. So good point. Okay, let's move on. All right, we're talking about learned helplessness versus the growth mindset. And I think this is where kids who are math phobic or stressed about math can really benefit from understanding what they perceive about themselves in math and how they can change that. And we as the adults and the supporters can help them as well. So learned helplessness is this idea that, you've been told you can't do it, or you feel you can't do it. Somebody else is trying to help you along, but you're just sort of riding the wave and letting somebody else show you the way, as opposed to taking it on for yourself. So we've got, as an adult, as an educator, as a parent, we want to model the problem solving. We want to show our students how to break it down. And sometimes we need to break it down even further than we originally think, because that child just doesn't have the background or the foundation knowledge to be able to get to that next level. Reminding a student of their own perseverance, reminding them of a time where they at first couldn't do something, like maybe riding a bike, or what else? Swimming or playing an instrument, and reminding them something that's far outside of academics, and then reminding them how they had to work at it. How many times did they have to practice their jump shot before they got it right, and consistently. I also would stress the process over product, and that's something that I think in a time constraint situation is difficult. When you have a lot of homework to finish, when your teacher has assigned 3 pages of math homework and it's taking an hour and a half to do the first page, sometimes our tendency is to be like, okay, let's just get it done. Let's just get it done. But the truth is that if we're just rushing through it, we're not actually modeling that perseverance, and we're not modeling the time is of the essence, but time is necessary in order to really understand something. So the process, I would much rather my students get 3 questions, do them well, and do them with proper structure and understand what they've done, than do 10 questions quickly and sloppily and not get the answer because they are just kind of rushing through something. And patience. And that is the big one for the parent to model, to stay calm, to stay grounded, even when that child is blasting hot air at you because they don't want to be there. As I said, I just experienced it this afternoon. And the idea of encouraging the growth mindset, we can talk about letting the child hold their own pencil, letting them take control of writing the steps down. There's something called productive struggle. And productive struggle is actually something that growth mindset, Carol Dweck has come up with this, has studied the brain. And she has proven that when you struggle through something, when you sit through those dark, uncomfortable moments of not knowing and feeling, well, all I can say is uncomfortable, feeling not good about that situation, your brain is actually working to create a deeper groove. And there's more brain activity that's going on when you have a productive struggle than when you are just given the answer, or you're copying the answer, or you're just sort of following something along. When you actually work through the problem yourself, your brain is more active, which leads to more learning and which leads to more success. I would also say, as a parent, to ask guiding questions. So, for example, we might say, I was working on factors this afternoon. So, the factors are two numbers that multiply together to make one number. And let's say we were working on the factors of the number 6. So instead of giving my daughter, telling her what they are, I said, well, let's start at the beginning. 1 times what makes 6? Fill in the blank. Okay, so 1 times 6. Great. 2, is there anything, if you multiply it by 2, will you get 6? So she said, oh yeah, 3. Okay, great. So we've got 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. Excellent. And we went through the list. I wasn't giving her the answers, but I was asking her the guiding questions so that she would find the answers on her own. Okay, let's move on.
We have a question in the chat.
Sure.
Too. It's that Miriam asked, why do you think the school system creates so much anxiety for so many kids?
How much time do you have, guys? Like, I could be here all night talking. Why does it create so much anxiety? I think there's a lot to do with marks and versus understanding. And in the classroom situation, as I was describing before, you're in a very confined time frame. You have a certain number of hours over the entire year to cover an entire year's worth of curriculum. And you, as the teacher, let's say you're a grade 5 teacher, you only have 3 lessons to cover factors, or to cover fractions, or 2 weeks to cover fractions. And when things move quickly and a child doesn't have enough time to process the information, and they're watching what they perceive as everybody else around them getting it, doesn't necessarily mean that they are, but that's what they feel, because they're feeling like they're not getting it, and they're watching everybody move forward, and things are moving at a fast pace. It creates this, it's almost like we talk about FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Like a person doesn't feel like they're grounded, or they have enough understanding of that content. And then the way that the curriculum builds is one layer over another. So if you don't get step 1, it's going to be really difficult for you to get to step 2. And if your class is now at step 5 and you're still at step 1, it's going to be really hard for you to keep up in class and to stay focused and to stay feeling like you get what's going on, because in reality, at that moment, you don't get it. Not yet. But the curriculum moves so quickly, the expectations are very high. We still work on a marks basis and a show what you know in a test assessment, whether you call it a test or an assessment or a check-in or a show what you know, ultimately, we all know that there has to be some way of evaluating whether we know what we're talking about on this content or not. So I think there is anxiety that's built into the curriculum because it moves quickly, but I also think that part of it is just the mindset that we have about math, that it's either right or it's wrong, and it's now or it's never. And that's something that we have to try and counteract at home. I hope that answers the question. Okay, let's
So
keep.
we're about halfway through, so we could, you said you wanted to answer some questions.
Super, I love it. Sabrina's keeping me on track. Does anybody have any other questions or comments about, oh, Miriam says it totally makes sense. I grew up in a different country and things never moved so quick, and there were less tests and not that frequent. Is the Ministry of Education thinking about rethinking the curriculum? Yes, it really does. Oh, and thank you for commenting, validating my my explanation. So your question or the comment is, do I think maybe that the curriculum is going to be changed? Well, we've just in the last few years, here's the thing about curriculum, and especially math curriculum, there's always a pendulum, right? There's a pendulum that swings. So for 10 years, we believe we should be doing it this way. And then we do a whole bunch of testing and we see that maybe that wasn't the best way because our students aren't performing as well as we wanted them to. So then we swing the pendulum the other way, we try something else. And generally we find that that doesn't work either. And we kind of keep moving from pendulum side to side. One of the things that I feel, and this is the way that we approach learning and math, particularly at Ruth Rumack's learning space, is that we look at what works best for that particular student and what supports do we need to put in place, what is their learning style, what are their learning needs or challenges, and then from there we can put a program together that's going to meet their specific needs. And unfortunately, in the larger classroom, the Ministry of Education, even a private school, can't really do that because they have many, many needs, many personalities, and many variables to deal with in the classroom. So the Ministry of Education is actually in the process of revamping things again, because our math test scores were pretty low in the last go round. And we'll see where it goes. But what I think is you have to know your own child best. You have to know what makes them tick, what makes them, how do they learn? Are they a visual learner? Are they an auditory learner? That type of thing. And then help them to kind of reinterpret the situation or the content through that lens. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, aren't we, Sabrina? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Any other questions so far that you want to put in the chat? And you know what, I would love it if you could just, because I always feel like I'm talking to a giant void, if you could just put in a quick line about what are you taking away so far? Has anything struck you as interesting? What's resonated with you? What makes sense to you? Or were you struck by an aha moment where you went, oh, okay, so that, or something that you might want to apply in your own work with your own kids? See if anybody's brave enough to put something in the chat. It takes bravery. It takes bravery. It takes courage to share in an environment where we don't really know each other and can't see each other.
Did you want to address any of the questions we got before the webinar at this time?
See what we've got.
Save them for later.
My screen has shut down, so I'm gonna have to give it a moment. I think let's move on, Sabrina, and then preventing helplessness. Thank you, Alex. Was a good insight. Yeah, we really want to steer our kids away from thinking that they can't do it by providing them opportunities to show that they can do it. And I think that's a good one. What have we got here? Miriam says the peer pressure is the aha moment that kids perceive that others do understand better. Yeah, it happens in the classroom all the time. Thank you. Nadine said, I appreciate the connection you've made between Math-Phobia and growth mindset. Hadn't made that connection. Oh, I'm so glad we made a connection. I love that. And Alex is asking guiding questions rather than doing it. That is a huge one. And it takes practice as the parent to be able to not give the answer, not jump in to say, no, that's not how you do it. This is how you do it. But with practice, you will get it. You will become more comfortable with asking the question as opposed to answering the question. And Nicole says, we talk a lot about a growth mindset these days. And I think this is very relevant to math. What you said about creating a shift in mindset is a good first step before tackling the math concepts. I agree, because that's almost like our perceptions of ourselves are, they're the guiding principles that lead us through life. So if we have this perception that we can't do something for whatever reason, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, I can't do it, and then I don't do it, and then it comes back and it validates that I'm not good at it. I didn't do well on this test, so obviously I'm not good at it. So if we can shift the mindset first, and we're going to talk about ways to keep things light and airy and more fun, then we can potentially have more opportunity to show those children that they can have success. And Sally says, so if I recommend you to a client with whom I conducted a comprehensive neuropsychological assessment and they have a definite learning disability in math that has led to substantial anxiety, would you address both? She is less able. It is not just anxiety. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the work that we do, we work with many students who, as I said, come with a psychoeducational evaluation that is full of variables. Sometimes they are diagnosed learning challenges. Sometimes they are focus and attention issues. Sometimes it is an anxiety issue that is a clinical anxiety issue, as well as just, general anxiety. And those are things that we address because we work one-on-one with our students. We can create an environment that feels comfortable and safe for them, to provide them with both the skill that they need and also the environment to release some of that anxiety. So, and Sally, for sure, we can continue our conversation afterwards or at a later date offline as well. So Carrie says, can you assess if there is a legitimate LD? We do not do the assessment. That's something that a psychoeducational evaluator, a psychologist would do, or a neuropsychologist would do. And there's a whole battery of tests and things that they would look at in terms of the ability of that particular student. And when you do a psychoeducational evaluation, it's not just looking at math. You're looking at everything: memory, visual spatial ability. You're looking at many different cognitive processes as well as skill-based processes. All right, Patrick says, challenge of different route to same answer can hopefully be addressed through guiding questions, but highly dependent on parents' comfort with math. That is very true. If you are not comfortable with math yourself, it is difficult to teach your children to be comfortable with math. That is an absolute. And that's also part of the growth mindset, which is sharing with your kids, you know what, this is uncomfortable for me too. I'm not really sure I know how to do this question, but let me look it up. Let me Google it and then see if I can work backwards to figure out what we need to do next. But modeling that curiosity and that calm and that ability to problem solve, you are giving your kids some of the best skills that they will need for life. So it doesn't have to just be about math, but showing your kids that if you don't know the answer to something, that's okay. There are ways to figure it out and find out and validate whether you're on the right track or not. So I would say that it is challenging. And sometimes a parent has to do a little bit of their own homework to make sure they understand how the teacher is presenting it and try and follow those teacher steps first. And if not, look for the alternative. All right, Carrie says, done a psych ed, dyslexic but undetermined on math. Does that make a difference? Well, I will have to say that dyslexia or a reading challenge will affect math, because a person can have excellent math computational skills, but have challenges with reading. And when you have challenges with reading and you are doing a word problem, for example, or you're trying to follow along on an example that the teacher has provided, the words will get in the way, especially when we talk about multi-step problems and story problems where there's a whole lot of extraneous information. For a lot of our students who have reading challenges but are actually very good at math computation, they may not do well at math, not so much because of their ability to understand the numbers, but it's the ability to understand the question and how to interpret the question. And those are things that we teach very explicitly as well. In fact, we're going to talk about later. We have a new new class called Problem Solvers, which teaches a very strategic and systematic way of addressing word problems. Very scaffolded, lots of fun. We're going to talk about that later. Okay, so as Sally says, the reverse can happen if both parents are engineers and the child has weak visual spatial skills. The parents can't seem to understand why it's so hard for their child. And you're right. I'll tell you a very quick story, and then I know Sabrina really wants to get to her part, and I want her to get to her part. So I had a student who, again, she's probably close to 40 now. Oh my gosh, I'm so dating myself. It's terrible. Anyway, she was in grade 7, and her father was an actuarial accountant, like a huge numbers guy, really, really bright, really numbers focused, you know, and she had a lot of challenge with math. And he was the one in charge of helping her with the math homework because mom also felt very uncomfortable with math and sort of was hands off, like, well, no, you do it, Dad. Well, their sessions never went well. And Dad could see it. He could see it very clearly. He could see what she needed to do. It was very hard for him to communicate how to do it or how to break it down because he just knew. He just knew how to do it. He didn't have a roadmap to get there because in his brain, he didn't need it. So most of their sessions would end in tears, and some frustration would come out on both sides, a lot of hair pulling. And that's about the time that she came to see us, and we started working on math. And I taught her the same mantra, that she is a math genius. And I have to say, she followed through with high school. She graduated with her proper math credits, but it took some time to get her to understand, and working with Dad too. I did some parent coaching with Dad to help him understand how to approach her lack of understanding and her anxiety in a more gentle way, and in a way that was more understanding and more compassionate to where she was coming from. And that relationship did repair over time, which I'm really glad to say. Okay, I'm going to come back to these, but we want to move on. We're going to talk about making math fun.
Okay, so one of the ways that you can make math more fun is to make it more relevant. So this question of when will I ever use this? There's it can be a frustrating question for sure, but I think kind of my go-to, if I can't think of a real life connection with that direct skill, which usually I can, is you have to progress on these skills in order to do what you want to do later. You do what you have to do now so you can do what you want to do later. We have all these things we have to learn, and then you get to, with an education, you get the power of choice, and you can choose what career you want to go into. So that's kind of the angle I usually take. But if it's something that I can directly relate to daily life or career, that's even better. And so I'll just highlight a few of these. I think with daily life, I like the adjusting recipe size. When your kids are in like grade 3, 4, you can start teaching them how to double a recipe, half a recipe, how to use substitution. Like, if the recipe calls for unsalted butter and all we have at home is salted butter, how much do I use? Well, there's actually a ratio that you can use, and you reduce the salt in the recipe, and it makes it okay to use salted butter. When you go on trips, having the kids convert the currency, calculating distance on a road trip and how long it took, and the rate that you drove, or even how many liters of gas you used to get if you drove. Also taking out a loan. I would say it was interesting, when I was trying to figure out whether to pay off my car right now or to just keep making minimum payments, and then calculating how much extra interest I would owe. And was I really willing to be uncomfortable financially by just paying it off? But then the long-term effects are better. Those kind of conversations, I mean, you can expose your kids to that just so that they know that you use math in your everyday life, which I think is honestly the best way to get kids to realize that math is everywhere, is if they hear you talking about how you use math in your life or in your career. That can be really powerful. So if you have ideas of how you use math in your life, I'd love to hear it. You can put it in the chat. Also the career, all these different careers use a lot of math. The video game designer, I'll talk quickly about that one. So my husband's actually a designer. He doesn't do video games, but like web apps. But when he was in university, he took a video game design class, and he had to create a virtual environment for a virtual reality game. And in order to create objects that lived in that environment, he had to use polygons. And then for positioning, he had to use X, Y, Z coordinate position. And so a lot of kids, they don't think of like, oh, the person who created my Fortnite game had to use math to actually create what I see on the screen and what the characters can do. And so, yeah, I hear some compounding interest, working in HR, doing employment statistics, surveying in university. Yeah, thank you for sharing those. So another way to make math a lot better for your kids, not only making it relevant, but making it fun. And sometimes these are so simple. It can be as simple as making homework time just a little different. Instead of working at the desk, let's work on a whiteboard. There's these whiteboards that you can get from like Home Depot that you can just stick on your wall. You can use a glass, like a glass cabinet, and have them use Expo marker on there. Have them sit on the floor rather than at the desk. Let them stand or move around. Sometimes when we were in the office, not virtual, sometimes we would play soccer for like 1 or 2 minutes in between each word problem, just to keep it interesting and keep my student on top of things. So this kind of relates to the next one, is the short break. So there's those little basketball hoops that you can put over a trash, or over just like a bucket or something, and you can have your kid take a shot in between each problem. Maybe if they get it right, they can take 2, something like that. And it might seem like you're actually slowing them down because you are taking breaks, but they are more motivated to work through that because you're making it fun and different. So you actually get through more work than if you were just to sit at a desk and let's just focus and do this right now.
It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it, Sabrina?
Yeah.
That you would think that, well, by taking a break, it's going to take me so much longer, and they're just going to get unfocused, and they're going to get, obsessed with doing the activity and not back on the work. But I would say from our experience that we actually get higher productivity out of the kids when we can pepper it in with something exciting and interesting. And for the most part, for us, and even with my own kids, that's what they look forward to. So we have a big glass cabinet in the kitchen, and when we're doing our homework, we often do the problems on the glass cabinet instead of doing them on paper. And the first thing that my daughter says is, where are the whiteboard markers? Like I don't want paper. I just want to do it on the glass cabinet. It's different, and it actually holds their attention. They're more engaged than when they're tuning out because they're feeling the apathy of doing the work.
Right. Or even like I had a student who was really into coloring, and she loved cats. So I just printed out this coloring sheet of, it was like 16 different cats. And so we numbered them. And then every time she solved a problem, she would do the course, she would color in the corresponding cat. And she thought it was so fun, and it was so simple. But you can also incorporate movement. So the basketball thing or trashketball, you can take recycled paper and make little balls and throw that. You could also have like when it's warmer, I guess, outside, have students move around outside or run around outside. I guess they could do that if they're dressed properly. And then drawing and using visuals, I think, makes it a lot more fun. Like even for word problems, sometimes I have my students draw the scenario, not to really, not
for the, like a diagram for the math so much, but to assess their comprehension of what they just read. Like, let's draw this. You know, Johnny went to the store, he stayed there for 5 minutes. What's the, if he got there at 4:05, when did he leave? You know, they have to use a clock and figure out elapsed time for that, but maybe they should draw out the scenario, or put themselves in the problem, replace Johnny with their name, and have them think it through that way, or even act it out. That can be fun too. Another great tool is to have manipulatives. So here's some really common ones for the PJ range, which is kindergarten through grade 6. So a deck of cards is great because you can do war with basically any operation. So instead of putting down one card and just the winner is the person who has the greater value, you put down 2 cards and you add those together, or you subtract them, you multiply them. Division's a little harder, but and then the first person who says the answer wins the card, or the person who has the larger sum or product. Also, play money can be really fun when you're working with money problems. Fraction strips are a great tool because oftentimes kids will memorize operations for fractions without actually understanding what a fraction is, which really impedes their ability even up till high school. Like there's a huge study showing that understanding of fractions for some reason is this powerful predictor for high school math understanding. The Judy clock, you can move those little the hands on the clock to show elapsed time, to tell time.
Can I jump in there? Because the Judy clock is interesting that it's set on cogs and wheels. So as the minute hand moves, it's pulling the hour hand at the same rate. So you can, as the hour hand moves, the minute hand is also moving. So it actually shows things moving in, I guess, in tandem, which is really how the time works. And I'm going to jump back to the fraction strips because these are something you can make yourselves. You can actually make as an activity with your child. It takes a little bit of pre-measuring to make sure that you're doing it. You can buy them this way. We have a set that are foam and that have a magnetic strip on the back. So I will put them on a cookie sheet and then use the different strips. Let's say I want to talk about comparing fractions, how many quarters make a half? So you can stack them up one on top of the other. So if each one of these, I'm pointing to my screen, but each one of those fractions is its own piece, you pick them up and you move them around so that you can compare how many quarters make a half, how many eighths make a quarter. And that way you're visually seeing. And for kids who don't understand the fraction sort of in the 2D realm, or just the concept of fractions, actually being able to measure them, put them together, stack them on top of each other, make it more 3D can be really, really helpful. Even through, you know, I've used fraction strips like this, even with high school students who are still struggling with the idea of fractions and how they compare to each other.
Yeah. So here's some more that are not so traditional. So you can use Hot Wheel cars, you can use Cheerios, M&Ms. I think M&Ms or Skittles are good for grouping, like showing equal groups, like in this example, or even categories. Or you can create like a lot of kids learn when they first learn data management, they learn frequency tables and chart and you know, different charts, and they can actually make a chart with food. So with M&Ms or Skittles, and that could be a fun way to do it.
Always motivating. Food is always
And Legos are really good for fractions. So you can show, like this is just an example, 3/5 and 2/3 with the different colors, and how it actually corresponds to the meaning of those fractions. And there's also an array here with the Hot Wheels cars, and then with just basic counting when they're learning how to add, this one's using raspberries and blueberries, then it can just make it a little bit more fun to add with fruit.
It's also something that allows you to have a teachable moment when you're not actually doing homework. So, I try and kind of infuse a few little math type things around the house I can't say every day, but when the opportunity arises. So for example, if you're putting things for a younger child on their plate and you ask them to count how many of this and count how many of that, or what's the difference between my age and my sister's age, or, if you are going to add something to something else, we're going to talk a little bit sort of money, and money is a great way to be using those impromptu moments to teach certain concepts. I'm just going to go to the chat for a second. Sally is sharing that there is a new book called Deal Me In, written by a psychologist in the Learning Center at McGill University, which talks about all sorts of card games and the skills that they teach based on the curriculum. So that would be great. If Sally, if you could put the ISBN number in there, that would be terrific. And we have a question: should kids on an IEP get different set of math homework? My child is part of the regular classroom. When given regular math homework, he can maybe do 4 out of 10 questions. We will come back to that one because I think that's an important one to address. So hold on to that thought and we will be back to it. Over to you, Sabrina.
So I'm just going to share some ideas for 3 different areas where you can have fun with math with your child. So math with money is the first area. So if you can just think of maybe one thing you could try from all these ideas I'm going to share, that would be great. So you can have your child estimate the bill when you go grocery shopping. So look at the cart. We looked at the prices while we were walking by and putting food in the cart. What do you think the total bill is going to be? If they're a little older, what is once they calculate the total, or once the cashier calculates the total, what's an estimation for the tax? You can also have them compare prices using the unit value, or the value of 1, I guess. You can also have them break change. You can have them count spare change from, the car or the wallet, the purse, calculating tip. So saying, I'm gonna, once my hair salon opens up, I'm gonna go get my hair cut, and this is how much I'm gonna pay for it, but what tip should I offer if it's gonna be 15%, let's say, or if I take a Uber, what's my tip gonna be?
Carrie says in the chat that we can't go shopping now, which is very true. It's very true, but there's a lot of online shopping going on, and you can do the same thing. So, cover that total, use some friendly numbers, round up or round down, and then you can still get your kids to calculate, even if you're not actually physically doing the grocery shopping.
Right. So you can also do a comparison with some grocery services. So some of them charge a flat fee, some of them charge a percentage. So which one would be better for us? And maybe if we're just getting a few things, it would be better for us to use the percentage. But if we're getting, enough food for 2 weeks, we should go with the flat fee, something like that. Determining discount, that's a good one. Creating a budget and tracking your expenses. I'm doing this with a student who's in grade 10. I think you could start really early with this, especially if your kids get some sort of allowance, or they're working towards some goal, like maybe they want something and you're like, okay, well, why don't we create a savings plan instead of just getting it, and they're not actually realizing what it took to build up that amount, or how long do you think it'll take you to earn that? Things like that could be really, really informative, I think.
This summer, knowing that my daughter was not going to be able to go to camp, somewhere in June, and she's been bugging me for months and months and months at that point to redo her room. So I decided that this was going to be the summer project, and I gave her a budget, gave her a dollar amount. I said, this is what we have to spend on it. We created a spreadsheet. so that she put her wish list, and she loves to do the online shopping, so she knew where to find all the things. She knew what bed frame she wanted, and she knew what color she wanted, and she knew what accessories she wanted. And I said, great, here's your total. You can get anything you want within reason within this budget total, and you have to show me your spreadsheet. So she worked on her spreadsheet, and then we calculated the tax on top of that. She was a little annoyed to know that the tax was going to come out of her budget as well. And then at the end of it, she actually had to make some really hard decisions, because she was sort of using that money up faster than she thought. But it allowed her the opportunity to say, okay, well, maybe this part isn't as important. I don't need this giant stuffy. Instead, I'll get this. And so she played with her budget until she got it within the confines. And once she got it within the confines, then we hit buy. And then the rest of the summer was putting it all in place. So it helped me stretch out my activities with her too.
That's cool. Okay, so another idea or another area. Oh, Patrick says, what about bartering? I would exchange this for that, 4 quarters for $2. That's a good one too. Yeah. Realizing that those are the same. Or even getting, I know there's a grocery store near my house that lets you actually, you could kind of like, you could kind of negotiate on prices. So what? That might be, yeah. Wow. It has to be like, near spoiled fruit or something like that. And they're willing to budge on it. But that's a good segue to math and cooking. There's so much math and cooking and science. And I think it's really fun to learn about math through cooking. So some ideas I have for this is, like I said before, doubling and halving a recipe. Also, experimenting with proportions to see how it changes the taste, because that's really what cooking is, right? Is you're using different proportions of ingredients. Measuring the ingredients, I think is really important, seeing how it's different. Like, are we measuring by weight? Are we measuring by capacity? And do they give us the same result? Which one's more accurate? Reading the nutrition labels and figuring out what they mean for the percentage of the daily calorie intake, and maybe your daily calorie intake is more or less, and adjusting those numbers. Converting measurements between different units. So sometimes your recipe will have, like, I know sometimes I'll find a recipe from somebody in the States where the maybe the can of sauce, let's say, is in ounces, or fluid ounces, but then I'll go to the store and they're all in milliliters, so I have to convert it to make sure I'm getting the right amount. Also, that fraction of a plate that shows the different food groups, making sure that your plate is healthy and follows that fraction. I don't think mine does very often follow that. Yeah, so I really like, I think there's lots of ideas for math and cooking. So Ruth talked about this one with her daughter, the home improvement and decorating. So another idea for this is creating a blueprint, and having every centimeter on your blueprint represent a foot in the room that you're redecorating, using scales, estimating the area of a room, and then actually measuring it to see if your estimate was correct. Maybe doing a scavenger hunt in your house for things that meet certain criteria. So let's say, can you find something in the house that's 30 centimeters long? Can you find something that's a meter wide, and making it a game, maybe a competition between siblings. You could also calculate the cost of paint, if you're going to paint a room, figuring out the area of each wall and how many paint cans would cover the 1 square foot, let's say. Also, you can have kids build models, measure it, test it for strength out of Legos or snap cubes, recycled cardboard. I know when I was teaching in the classroom, we would have
sometimes we would have competitions where they had to build a structure completely out of paper and it had to hold a stapler. And so like those are more engineering type things, but there's a lot of math involved in that.
And
Also,
just trial and error too.
right, yeah, and that whole problem solving process of perseverance. And centering a picture, that can be pretty tricky. Centering it vertically on the wall or horizontally between, two shelves, let's say, or two pieces of furniture, and measuring it just right so that it's in the center. Using a leveler to visualize a 180-degree straight line. Counting listed parts from furniture assembly instructions. These are all ways that we see math in construction. So
I would say I really like that idea actually about, when we do the DIY projects at home and getting our kids involved, not just in the building of something or in the participating and changing your environment, but just getting that IKEA box and opening it up and having a systematic way of addressing the parts that are in there. My brother-in-law is from Sweden, and I have never seen a more efficient IKEA furniture putter together than my brother-in-law. And he really taught me that there is a system and a structure. And I can equate that to how do you do a word problem? How do you do an algebra problem where you have a certain number of steps and you've got to work through those steps? And doing it in real life for those kids who are really good visually and really good with their hands is a great way of modeling what that looks like when you get back to the paper. His technique of taking all the pieces out, he groups them together. He finds the patterns. He looks, counts the numbers, make sure he has everything before he starts. I'm telling you, he's like super uber organized in putting furniture together, but it's efficient. And he taught me that you will know if you're missing a piece before you even begin. And then you don't get to the end of it and you're like, well, I don't know what's missing. Why can't I? Anyway, it's a good tip.
Good idea. Yeah. So we have some resources here for online places to look when you need help with homework. So if this is your modeling for your kids, how do you get help with the homework or having your kids do this? There's Khan Academy. This one's very, very good, very organized. It actually has the entire curriculum by grade, organized by skill.
All the way through to grade 12. Yeah.
Yeah. And multiple topics too, not just math, but math is where he started when he created it. He was tutoring his cousin, I think, and he started creating these math videos. So that's kind of like the Khan Academy's math resources are the best because that's where it all started. It's also useful for you to look at those if you're unfamiliar with the math homework that your child is doing. iExcel is really good. Yeah, I would say, so Sally said, can we print this screen? I would say you could take a screenshot right now and save it on your computer.
You will also have, we will send you, I believe it's either tonight or tomorrow, you will get some online resources as well, or some resources from us that we will send to you. And if you want more information, by all means, take a screenshot, or, you can reach out to us and we'll make sure that you get the resources from tonight.
None of them require a license. They're all free.
I'm also going to go back.
Our iExcel does if you want to have unlimited problems, but every day they allow you 10 practice problems for free.
Yeah. I would say Nicole said that she makes kits of random Lego pieces at school and asks her students to design and write instructions for building an item. And other students have to try and follow their steps. Really enjoyed this and helps them with processing, planning, and following multi-step instructions. I love that idea. And, it's creative and it's autonomous, and you're giving the student the opportunity to be the teacher. Oh, great idea. Great idea. What else have we got? One more. And I would say that I'm going to take a few other questions if there are any other questions, or is there something else we want to go for a couple more slides? I think we've got a couple more things to say.
Okay. So Math is Fun is it's an explanation site. So it has like a step-by-step how-to of different concepts. Academics is games, math games. Math Antics is math videos. They're really, really good. I use them a lot in my lessons. And Nerd Study is specifically for high school, and they're actually based in Toronto, which is pretty cool, and their channel on YouTube. Okay, so I'll talk quickly about our online group class around word problems. So this is all about boosting confidence with word problems. I teach the junior class, and my colleague teaches the senior class. So the junior one runs on Saturdays and the senior one runs on Sundays. It's offered online, and you can access it at this link.
URL.
Yeah, I forgot words for a second there. I'll put it into the chat so everyone can see it. And we are running these classes again. So the one that started just recently it's 6 sessions long. So it'll be over in about a month, and then we'll rerun it. But it's all about breaking down word problems and using different strategies and figuring out what strategy is best for which problem. And we try to make it fun. We have interactive Google slides so that kids are showing their thinking virtually. And, you know, me as a teacher, I can be on the document, and every kid has their own slide and they're showing their work, and it works really well.
You can move things around, and you can show your work, and you can ask questions. And it's a very small group. It's only up to 10 kids, I think, is the maximum.
Right. Mm-hmm. So Ruth, did you want to talk about one-to-one?
Sure. I would love to talk about one-to-one. So we've alluded to it in our sessions. What we do in our one-to-one instruction, we can work with students as early as kindergarten or even earlier, all the way through to the end of grade 12. And some university students will come to see us for math as well. You know, we really work on a structured, systematic base. And we want to make sure that our students have a very strong, finite foundation so that they can build from there. We work on confidence, we work on the mantra, making sure that they've got that growth mindset, helping them to achieve it. And it's not just about providing the safe learning space for them to ask questions and to feel comfortable, but it's also about really breaking that information down into its smallest pieces and then building it back up, following a step-by-step process. And lots of review, lots of customized lessons, and lots of visuals, even online. As Sabrina was saying, we use interactive whiteboards, which means that we create games or activities for our students ahead of time. They can, sometimes they're moving parts, sometimes they're putting things together, sometimes they're taking things apart. Let's say we're working on grade 10 algebra. We may have a problem that has part of the steps done, and then the student has to fill in the rest. It's very engaging and very multi-sensory, even though we're online. So I have to say hats off to our amazing teachers for putting all of our resources that we would be doing face-to-face in a format that is still engaging and exciting. So we have a few other, let's see. Any questions? I've got a couple of comments here that one of our parents, Jen, said that she had a brainwave today, that she decided to cover her daughter's paper so that she wasn't overwhelmed by too much information and just show her one row of questions at a time. And that seemed to reduce her anxiety, which I think is great. We do that all the time. And in fact, sometimes for students who have test anxiety, you may want to actually give them or talk to the teacher about giving them the test in sections. So they don't get 5 pages all at once. They just get 1 page. They do that page, they hand it in, they get the next page. There are all sorts of different strategies around test taking and the anxiety as well. Let's see what else we've got. Oh, I've got to get my cursor moving properly. Miriam says her daughter goes through ups and downs and she gets really confused by the teacher, and then mom undoes the confusion, and that happens. I think learning math, especially if you have some deeper challenges with math and some anxiety around it, it is a bit of a roller coaster, and you're gonna, kind of get to that top of the arc and feel good and confident, and then a new concept is going to come in. We're going to have to build that structure back up again. it's an ongoing process. You know, nothing is a magic bullet or a magic pill that's going to take away that anxiety overnight. But what we're hoping for is that the students realize that it's not a reflection of them or their personality or who they are as a person. It's a concept, it's a construct, and it's a way of thinking that encourages curiosity, as opposed to, you know, just getting the right answer. So trying to figure it out and trying to figure out how to sort of stay in that math moment, persevere in that math moment, even, as I said before, if it feels uncomfortable at first. Let's see if we've got any other questions. Let's see. Patrick says, it was a ways away, but before school starts, my children benefited from a 2-week review class with RRLS. Thank you, Patrick. Allowed for a good discussion at the beginning of the school year with the math teacher. Absolutely. I think, you know, we talk about summer slide, and it's very difficult to talk about summer in the middle of February when it looks like it does outside, but it is coming. And especially over the last year, the tumultuousness of the curriculum, the fact that the kids have been in school and out of school, some have not been back to school at all, they've only been virtual. It's been a really rough year. It's been a really rough year for many reasons. And I get concerned about next year's curriculum, because if we missed half of last year and they're kind of in and out of school this year, and then we get to next year, we're almost 2 curriculum years behind. So thank you for bringing that up, Patrick, because what that's reminding us is that if your children do struggle, or just to get them comfortable and feeling confident going back into class for September, doing some work over the summer is really, really beneficial. And I can't tell you, you know, I talked about the student who was in the IB program earlier. She came every summer, and we reviewed the previous year, and then we previewed the year coming up so that she would feel comfortable in those first few weeks, first few months, that she had already seen that material, and it was familiar to her, and that way it wasn't as overwhelming. So I completely agree. I think it's an excellent strategy to be building in some math work over the summer, especially as we get closer to September. All right. Yes, helpful is a teacher assessment on strengths and weaknesses. Yes, so that we can give you an idea of where we see they're doing well and where we know they're struggling, and then vice versa. If we can get information from the classroom teacher, then we can pinpoint exactly what it is that we want to work on, so that we're not wasting the child's time, but we're also providing, you know, efficiency in terms of the lesson hours. All right, I'm going to go to a few. Oh, before we go to the questions, no, I'm going to do a couple of questions. See how much time we've got. Probably not. We're probably way over time as it is. Let's see. Somebody asked if comprehension of skip counting and fractions, clocks, and regrouping, if you should be teaching it the reasoning behind these things or just teaching it as memorization. And again, it depends on the situation. I think there are certain things that a child will need to memorize or have at least an ability to get to that right file folder in their brain. So multiplication tables, division tables, those types of things are good to just have at the ready. Kids who have memory issues or who have focus issues will sometimes have difficulty actually memorizing something. And that's when you want to make it fun, make it engaging, but understanding. For example, skip counting is this idea of counting by 2s, by 3s, by 5s. We like to do it with a ball. We're tossing the ball back and forth to each other as we're saying the numbers. So there's a kinesthetic aspect, and then there's the number aspect. But at the same time, we might look at it on a big chart, a hundreds chart, and circle every third number so that the student can actually visualize what we're doing. We're going from 3, adding another 3, saying that next number, adding the next 3, saying the next number. I find that we need to look at the child's own teaching or learning style. So if they're a very visual person, show it to them. If they learn best from acting it out, then do some role play, do some activities, something that shows what they're doing and they can move and talk it out at the same time. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Let's look at the key takeaways. We know that math phobia is real. Oh, we're going to talk about IEP. Yeah. We know that a growth mindset and modeling a growth mindset is the best way to get them on board and more curious and more engaged. Reminding your child of any time they learn something new, there will be a period of discomfort. It feels pretty awful to not know for a period of time. But as they move through it, it will become more and more clear. Persistence, we want to keep encouraging them to be persistent and asking those guiding questions and trying to make it more fun, more engaging. Sharing how you use math in your everyday life and putting some of these ideas of math at home to use. So I will talk a little bit about the IEP. An IEP is an individual education plan. And some students, you can have an IEP in the public school system, even without a psychoeducational evaluation or a designated learning disability, if the school feels that it is helpful for that child in a particular subject matter. And when you're dealing with math and an IEP, there are some, sort of go-tos that we like to talk about, including things like if you've got a child with memory issues or focus issues or any type of reading issue, often time and a half is helpful for tests and quizzes or exams. We like to talk about things like showing less on a page. So if your child is very visually distracted or has trouble with visual spatial organizing things on a page, using some assistive technology might be helpful as well. Also, we would say to make sure that the teacher understands, that classroom teacher has a good understanding of what the challenge is. I would always encourage a parent to have a conversation at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and at the end of the year to check in and see what's going on in each class. And particularly in math, if there are ways that the teacher can reduce the anxiety, as I was saying, Patrick is saying a quiet space to take an exam. Yes, sometimes that's possible. Sometimes it's not possible because they don't have room in the school, but it's always good to ask. And another thing that I find helpful, if a school's willing to do it, is an oral exam. And it's not what you would think that the student just says the answers out loud. Generally, what I recommend is that the student do the test the way that they would normally do it. If they get time and a half, give them time and a half. And then afterwards, when it's quiet, they sit with the teacher. The teacher reads the question out loud, reads over the answer that the student has given, and the student has the opportunity to add anything else that they might have forgotten or missed. And it's just a way of that student being able to hear their own process to know whether they have gone through all of the steps properly or if they might be missing something. Sabrina, do you have any other suggestions off the top of your head for some IEP accommodations?
Shorter tests, less multiple choice options are also possible. So instead of ABCD, just ABC. Having more space to work on the problem. So maybe one question per problem.
Yeah.
Allowing a calculator, allowing a memory aid that's pre-approved by the teacher, like a formula sheet or, the memory aid for kids with memory issues.
That's a big one, actually. That's a really big one. And that's fine. It's been so helpful. You have to have it approved by the teacher first, so it has to be done ahead of time. But it's something that is a reference sheet. So,
Right.
You've got the formulas right there. You don't need to memorize the formulas, but you know how to apply them. And one of the things that we have to sometimes convince, we don't call it a cheat sheet, but it's a reference sheet or a formula sheet. One of the things that we want to convince our children to advocate for themselves, and that's another part of this math phobia, is being able to ask questions and being able to go and say, this is how I learn best. That is a process, and it's a longer process, and it's something that comes with maturity as well. But again, good modeling and good practice. So the IEP, I think there's a long list of things that we could discuss on an IEP, and I'm happy to take the conversation offline as well at another time. But I think overall, what we want to do is make the learning environment, and I've said it before, a safe space. Make that space where you do the homework with your students or your children a place where they can ask questions, where they can feel comfortable making a mistake and showing that you are there to support them, even if you don't know the answer. You will help them find that answer, or you'll go on that journey together. All right, I'm going to just ask one last thing. If you can shove it, that's an odd way of saying it. Put it in the chat box. What are you taking away? What is it that you're going to leave tonight with? And remember that we will send some information to you back from some handouts and some things that you can use as reference. We're also going to ask you to fill out a very quick questionnaire, because we are also in the growth mindset and we always want to improve our webinars. So tell us what went really well, and things that you liked and areas that we could improve. Miriam says, great webinar. Thank you so much, Miriam. It's so nice to have you with us again. I know you've joined our other webinars too. Let's see. Thank you for the amazing webinar, says Susan. Thank you, Susan. And Nadine, deeply appreciate the resources and loads of examples. Oh, I'm so glad. You know, it's hard to know what's too much. Of course, I could sit here, and Sabrina, we could sit here for 2 more hours and keep talking about stuff that you could do. But of course, everything has to come to an end. Alex says, thank you. This was very informative. And oh, Miriam says sending information before the webinar could be helpful. Yes, thank you all. I'll keep that in mind, definitely. So just while you're still around, we do create the one-to-one support. We do test preparation, and we have group classes. And anytime that you want to reach out, you can find us at www.ruthrumac.com, and we will be very happy to be in touch and to share more about what we do. I'm going to stick around, but for those of you who have to leave, thank you so much for being with us. And if there's any other questions, I'll be here to answer them. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina.